Well, you know, when I say that the West lies all the time, that they do nothing but lie, and that they literally can't help it. They really literally can't help it because they are fundamentally and foundationally estranged from the truth. They don't have access to it, you know. I'm not saying that as an insult. I'm not just lashing out at the West or something. No, you have to understand this is factually accurate. It's true. And there are massive, complex ramifications from this fact. You know, you can't just say that the West are all liars and then click your tongue in contempt. Do you understand? There are whole systems of thought, systems of government based on those systems of thought, academic disciplines, fields of study, you know, economic, political, societal frameworks, and interpretive paradigm for understanding the world, all of which we have adopted. We've adopted it and taken it seriously, and all of that has been built by and for a so-called civilization that lies about everything. This is a disaster. I don't think you understand. It's like if you were a contractor, say, or an architect, you know, a builder, and you get hired to build a house. Someone hires you to build a house or to build a structure on a certain plot of land. Okay, now the one who hired you is giving you all sorts of strange demands, odd instructions, you know, farcical requests and stipulations of how he wants the building to look like, how he wants it to be. And you do what he wants. You follow all his instructions, and then he changes his mind. And then you need to redo the work. You know, you do all these time-consuming, tedious things that he's asking for. And finally, the house or the structure is built, but it's not architecturally sound. It's structurally flimsy. Nothing works. Stairs go to nowhere. The plumbing is tangled. The electrical wiring doesn't work. It's all a mess. On and on. It makes no sense. It makes no sense to you as an architect, as a builder, until you find out that the man who hired you is actually criminally insane and he murdered dozens of people. That's why he wanted you to build a house. You thought you were building a house, but all you were actually doing was building something to hide the bodies. All you did was cover a mass grave. And that man didn't care whatsoever if anything in that building worked at all. All it needed to do for him was to conceal his crimes. Do you see? That's the West. But now you're taking all of those instructions of that criminally insane person and putting them into your textbooks, putting them into your schools, into your minds. Even though all of those instructions were only given for one purpose, to conceal his victims. You know, to misdirect and to conceal, to deflect and to conceal his victims. It was never about building a sound structure. It was always just a cover-up. Once you realize that, then you realize that everything that you got from him is useless. I mean, it's useless to you. It's useful for them for the reasons that I mentioned, but it's useless for you because it's all lies. It's all based on lies. Your sociology, your economics, your political philosophy, your political science, your theories of this and that and the other. No, it turns out it was all just a cover-up, you know. GDP is not a measure of a healthy economy. That's like measuring someone's bicep to try to measure how strong they are. But see, that's exactly why they do it. That's exactly why they do what they do. Cover-up and misdirection. Military spending is not doesn't show you how strong your military is, but that's what they want you to measure. And that's what they want you to think that you are measuring, is the strength. You see? It's all cover up and misdirection. You see what I mean? Their whole so-called civilization, the core of the rot of their so-called civilization, and the core is rotten. The core of it has always been that they have never understood properly how to assign value to anything. They give value to what is worthless, and they treat as worthless what is valuable. And they do that in every sphere. Okay, so we're talking about a whole system of thought, a whole system of government based on that system of thought, economics based on that system of thought, and so on. All built on lies, misdirection, confusion, and misassignment of value. Well, it's a worthless system. It's a useless system. It's a rotten system. And you and I are going to have to come up with our own system, our own thought, our own fields of study, our own disciplines, our own way of understanding the world, our own paradigms, our own interpretation of reality based on our own sources of knowledge. And I mean, you have to dismantle everything that they gave you, everything that they gave you for understanding the world. You need to remove that lens that they gave you to look through, because it just distorts everything. You know, have you ever put on someone's glasses, right? Someone's glasses that aren't your prescription. Prescription glasses that are not designed for your eyes, are not designed for your vision. Well, you can't see in those glasses.
Right. It is said that black people do not have a history, but I'm sure black people can sit down and talk about their history. They can be able to sit down and bring articles and bring books and explain their history. And it's written and it's in books. But do white people have a history? Have white people ever sat down and explained their history, where they came from, how they were living, their cultures, and all that? Shahid Bolsen is trying to explain something here very fundamental, something very crucial, that the history that is known to the white people or the kind of a life they're living today is all but just a lie. The white rich people in America, this one I got from Tim Wise, sat down someday and they discussed on how they can be able to treat or to limit black people from advancing, from growing, and from living a better life in America. Because they felt a threat when blacks were really growing so fast, they were advancing so fast, they were doing things very easily, and they felt like if we allow these people grow the way they are growing, they are coming to overtake us very soon. What can we do? We need to make sure that this one does not go on. So they mobilized poor white people and they told them, our enemy is a black people, not because the enemy of the white people were black people, but because the white rich Americans did not want, the black Americans to grow and prosper and overwhelm them, you know. So they talked to the black, to the white, to the poor rich, to the poor Americans, and they told them, your enemy is a black American. And so they started fighting against the black Americans, thinking the black Americans were their enemy. Yet the real enemy of the white people were their fellow white people. So white people have been living knowing that our enemies are black people. They knew bad things about the black people. They knew that black people are poor. They knew that when you come to Africa, you're coming to find people who are living in forests, not in houses. You're coming to come across people who are very sick, like in Africa, there is poverty left, right, center. There is a lot of diseases in Africa and all those kind of things. They painted African in a certain way. They showed some certain pictures of Africa which were not true. You see, the white Americans themselves, that is how they believed, and therefore they are living in lies. Themselves, they are told about how good they are, about how superior they are. They're supposed to be, like they are taught a fake history. The things that is going on, they're making America great, and every other thing that white people are believing in isn't real. So America has been built in lies, and that is why we're calling it one of the empires which was built in lies. What white Americans know about themselves is not who they really are. And Shahid Bolsen is here to tell us. Today I'm hosting Shahid Bolsen. He is something for us and for the white Americans. And he's telling them right away that the life you're living is all but a lie. And you have to demand to know and to understand who you really are. Otherwise, you've lived in a lie. You are living in a lie for the rest of your life. Everything you've been told about yourself isn't really you. Let's take a look at Shahid Bolsen before we continue. I'm going to ask you to subscribe this channel, and also don't forget to like, share, and press notification bell. Be the first person to get every episode as it comes in. Now, as you're watching this video, prepare your thoughts. Have them shared in the comment section. I will do my best to make sure I read all of them and give a response where possible. But until then, let's take a look at the video.
Give you prescription lenses. He gave you exactly the prescription that you need. And if you try to wear any other lenses, it will only make your vision worse, and you'll be walking around blind. Especially those Western lenses. Because in fact, they didn't give you anything but blindfolds. That's what they gave you. They gave you a blindfold and called it glasses. But once you take the blindfold off, you take off those blinders, and you get your prescription lenses back on, then you can start to see the way things really are. So for instance, for me, with Middle Nation, with my content, I know it doesn't fit into any standard categories. Is it analysis? Is it commentary? Is it forecasting? Is it critique? Is it political? Is it economic? Is it social? Is it left? Is it right? On and on. Let me just clarify something about that. The kind of analysis that I do, people generally describe it as, and I've even described it myself as, geopolitical analysis. But that's not quite accurate. I've only said that because there isn't really a specific field that has a name for what we do. I'm not fundamentally interested in geopolitics as it is traditionally defined. My work, the work of Middle Nation, is focused on the analysis of power dynamics and then how those power dynamics play out, or how they're likely to play out. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that He puts one people in check by means of another people. He said that there are people who are higher ranks than others, that some have what others do not have, and so on. He said that struggles and battles are go by turns. All of that has to do with power dynamics and understanding who checks whom in this world, or who predictably could check whom. It seems to be pretty basic information that you're going to need to have if you want to understand what goes on in this world. Geopolitics in the conventional sense tends to fixate on the relations between states, you know, borders, alliances, treaties, military positioning, and so forth, which is basically like looking at the stage and the actors on the stage, but not looking at the directors or the script writers. But the Middle Nation approach goes further than that. We look at who actually has power, regardless of what kind of power that is. Now that includes state power, but also, of course, it includes private sector power, financial networks, media empires, asset managers, transnational corporate systems. These are not traditionally part of geopolitical analysis, but they're absolutely central to understanding the exercise of real world power. I mean, in my opinion, if you ever listen to an analyst, so-called analyst, talking about politics, talking about geopolitics, and they never factor in corporate power, they never factor in private sector power, the drivers of economies, the real drivers of policy, well, that's an incredibly shallow and ultimately misleading so-called analysis. So whenever you evaluate a situation, you shouldn't be asking, for example, what is the United States government doing? You should be asking, who is shaping the outcome? Who can impose costs? Who can alter behavior without being altered in return? Once you identify the who, then it's not that hard to understand the why, what the desired result is, and try to deduce, given what you know about the who, what are the chances that they're going to be successful? And then, what might be done about it? So this could be a country, it could also be a corporation, it could be a consortium, or an investor network. So you need a way of gauging real existing power, relative power, of any given actor, of any given entity that has influence over policy, or that wields, you know, significant degree of power in any given society. That's why at Middle Nation we developed what we call the Relative Power Index, RPI. The RPI is a model for roughly calculating functional leverage between power entities, or the general standing of any given actor in terms of power relative to others. We built that because the existing metrics, you know, GDP, military size, alliance structures, and so on, these are often misleading. They reflect the appearance of power, not its realistic functionality or its operation, you know, because a country might be rich but dependent. A military might be large but strategically irrelevant. A government might be in office but not in control. So the RPI is designed to identify real influence. It includes factors like decision-making authority. Can you impose binding outcomes? Control of inputs. Do others rely on you for what you control? Narrative control. Can you define reality for others? Immunity to retaliation. In other words, can you act without facing consequences? And your adaptability reserve. Can you survive and pivot through disruption? And it also measures negatives, the vulnerabilities, like direct dependence. How directly dependent are you? What's your exposure to disruption? And what's the perceived vulnerability of your state or your power? And this model is not static, necessarily so. It evolves because power is not frozen. It flows. And as the world shifts from the west to the south, from centralized empires to distributed blocks, the tools that we use to understand power have to try to keep up with those new dynamics. And like I say, everything that they gave us to measure power, well, they designed it so that we would always mismeasure power, so that we would see power where there isn't power and see weakness where there isn't weakness. They never wanted us to understand the real dynamics of power and the real dimensions of power. So that's why even the system that we have for measuring power has to be flexible, because something new might emerge that actually constitutes power that isn't in any existing metric, any existing system of measurement. You know, something that wasn't powerful 20 years ago or didn't constitute power 20 years ago may constitute power today. So again, like I say, we have to develop our own systems, our own method for identifying what power is and what the relative power is in relation to others. We have to come up with our own formulas. We have to come up with our own system for measuring. Because there's a big difference between, for example, looking powerful and being powerful. Those aren't the same thing. That's a distinction that the Middle Nation Relative Power Index is designed to clarify. It sort of cuts through the propaganda. It cuts through the noise, through all the theatrics of foreign policy, all the theatrics of empire. And it answers one question. Who has the power to shape outcomes without being shaped in return? That's real power. Not, you know, your military parades, not your fake GDP figures that count debt and billionaires as domestically productive. Real power is about leverage. So the RPI that we have created is a formula for measuring functional dominance. For example, if we apply it to the United States, right now, the U.S. still has some serious muscle left. We can't pretend otherwise. It still has power. It can still impose decisions on other countries through the IMF, through NATO, through the World Bank, and so on. It still controls key systems, you know, the financial infrastructure, tech platforms, their media empires, and to some extent, trade routes, to some extent. It can still shape reality through narrative, at least in the English language. That's declining. The facade is cracking. Its immunity to retaliation is even slipping. Its adaptability is declining. All of their institutions are too calcified. Their people are too divided. Their infrastructure is too old. The dollar itself is no longer unchallenged. Even its soft power, America's soft power, its reputational authority is collapsing. People see the hypocrisy now. They see the corruption now. They see the cruelty. Okay, so internally, America is dependent on imports, on foreign investment, on immigrant labor, on dollar hegemony. It's fragile. Externally, its enemies and even its allies know how to disrupt it if they want to. Cyber attacks, debt pressure, supply chain chaos. And crucially, no one in the world believes in America anymore. That's called perceived vulnerability. And it's one of the biggest forces right now shaping geopolitics because the perception of America has always been a major factor in the decision-making and policy-making of other countries around the world. What you think America is, what they can do, what you think they will do, always mattered before. It matters much less today than it ever did. So that's declining. The perceived vulnerability of America is significant and on the rise. So if you add up the formula, our RPI formula, well, America's score comes to around plus 12, which is still powerful, but it's not invincible, and it's shrinking. Unless the U.S. radically changes their direction, its power is going to fall below functional dominance by 2050. That's why we need accurate tools. At Middle Nation, we don't operate on fantasy or emotion. We measure real leverage. Because if you don't know who truly holds power, then you're just reacting blind all the time. You can't craft effective strategies. We're not interested in their stage performance. You know, we're interested in, as I say, the script that's written behind the scenes and who's directing that scene. That's why American power has to be scrutinized carefully. It has to be scrutinized closely to see how much of it they really have. Yes, the United States still has a relative power score, according to our index, of plus 12. It's not insignificant. They still control many levers. But there's a deeper truth here. It's not using that power for itself, not really. America is a host. It's not sovereign. It's a platform, not a state with independent volition. It's an instrument. Their power is no longer nationalistic. It's been instrumentalized by the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. What we refer to, as everyone knows, as the OCGFC. And the OCGFC are not patriots. They're not defending America. They're not interested in the welfare of American citizens, or even the longevity of the American state itself. Their allegiance is not to the flag. It's to capital mobility. It's to asset domination and the architecture of global control. Their loyalties are liquid. And what we're witnessing now in America is the systematic extraction of American power by the A-national elites. The A-national elites that got built up by their power in the first place. You know, they built American power via the military-industrial complex, and then they, in turn, were built up by that. But now they've surpassed it. The United States was built into a superpower precisely to serve as the enforcement arm of financialized capitalism, and that project is evolving. The enforcers are now being restructured. The OCGFC no longer need a single hegemon. They want distributed control across cooperative nodes, public-private partnerships, digital infrastructure, security agreements, asset management firms, and so on. So when we calculate that the U.S. still has decision authority, control of inputs, narrative control, you have to ask, but on behalf of whom? You know, the decisions made at the IMF are not made for Main Street. The control over trade routes that they have and supply chains doesn't benefit American workers or American consumers. The narratives that they're pushing in Hollywood or Silicon Valley don't reflect national interests. They reflect global social engineering. The Pentagon is not defending the homeland, it's defending investment portfolios. What this means is that America's RPI is no longer America's. The numbers are still there, but the ownership is not. You understand? The United States has become the strongman for an empire that it does not control, and from which it no longer benefits, really. Its power has been privatized. The state has been hollowed out. It's being used as a transnational tool to establish a new, more flexible system of national dominance, centered around capital, not countries. So when you hear that America is still powerful, remember this: it's not the United States that's powerful, not anymore. It's what's operating through the United States. And that's why Middle Nation doesn't just analyze states. We analyze systems of control, systems of power. And increasingly, the state is no longer the center of power. It's an instrument of power. I mean, does the United States government govern the United States, or does BlackRock? You know, we're trained to think of power in terms of presidents and congressmen, politicians, and so on, maybe the Pentagon. But real power is the ability to shape outcomes without being shaped in return, like I said. That's what the relative power index, our RPI, that's what that measures. Not symbolic authority, not popularity, just raw, functional leverage. And if we use this framework to assess, for example, BlackRock versus the United States, well, the results are deeply revealing and deeply disturbing, or that should be for Americans. I mean, start with decision authority. BlackRock isn't a government agency, but it might as well be. I mean, it manages over $10 trillion, $10 trillion in global assets. That means that it has a say in nearly every major U.S. corporation. It advises the Federal Reserve. It has executives embedded in the Treasury. When financial crises hit, Washington doesn't tell BlackRock what to do. BlackRock tells Washington what can be done. So their score is a 7.5 out of 10. That's for decision-making authority, BlackRock, over America. Then you can look at control of inputs. Well, BlackRock controls the flow of capital. It controls pension funds. It controls municipal bond financing. It dictates the so-called ESG compliance. That's not just control of money. That's control of what's built, where it's built, and who's allowed to operate it. So that's an 8.0 out of 10. What about narrative control? Well, BlackRock isn't making movies. They're not running TV stations. But it shapes financial orthodoxy. Through its research arms, through Bloomberg, through think tanks, it decides what counts as sound economics, good governance, you know, responsible investing. They decide that. And if you don't align with their narrative, well, then you don't get any funding. So they get a score of 6 out of 10 on that. Then we can ask, can BlackRock be punished? Are they immune to retaliation? The United States government can't regulate BlackRock without destabilizing its own economy. That's the genius of systemic entrenchment. If you try to pull out, you'll collapse the house. So BlackRock's immunity from retaliation score is a 7 out of 10. And finally, how easily can BlackRock pivot, can restructure to survive outside the U.S.? Well, completely. BlackRock is global, it's liquid, it's national. If Washington collapses tomorrow, BlackRock just relocates, it reintegrates, and it keeps profiting. So they get a score of 9 out of 10. Now, there's some reliance, sure. It operates within U.S. jurisdictions. It benefits from legal shelter. But that's just a 3 on the direct dependence scale, BlackRock's dependence on America. And their exposure to disruption is practically none. There's no serious movement within the United States capable of regulating or disrupting BlackRock. So the score there is just a 2.5. And the perceived vulnerability of BlackRock, Well, no one sees BlackRock as weak or in decline. If anything, they're perceived as untouchable. So they get a score of 2 out of 10. The final score, according to the RPI of Middle Nation formula, BlackRock's relative power over the United States is plus 30. That's an extraordinary figure. Not only does it outclass the U.S. government's ability to control BlackRock, it surpasses the dominance most empires had over their colonies back in the day. It means we need to stop mistaking governments for the highest authority. No, BlackRock is not elected. It doesn't answer to voters, but it has more functional power over the United States of America than Congress does. That's not conspiracy theory. That's not ideological rhetoric. That's a structural reality. And it exposes a much deeper truth that Western democracy, so-called, has been hollowed out from the inside. What you see is not what governs, and what actually governs cannot be voted out, and mostly can't even be seen. BlackRock is not an anomaly, it's a prototype, you know? So the question is, who governs your country? And are you sure that it's your government, Americans? Because in America, the answer is no. Your government doesn't govern you. BlackRock governs the United States, not metaphorically, not rhetorically, but functionally. BlackRock has more influence over the American state than the American state has over BlackRock. So what power does the U.S. government have over BlackRock? Do they have any power over BlackRock? Well, we ran that through our RPI system as well. Spoiler alert, they have very little power over BlackRock. And that reveals that the American government is no longer sovereign. Because really, can the American government tell BlackRock what to do? Well, technically, yes, but practically no, functionally no. You know, they could pass regulations, they could threaten antitrust action, but in reality, they don't and they won't. And if they tried, they'd pay the price. BlackRock has lawyers, they have lobbyists, they have leverage in every relevant agency. So relative to BlackRock, we gave the U.S. a 3 out of 10 in decision authority over BlackRock. That's the level of a weak junior partner in a business deal. If the U.S. clamps down, BlackRock just pivots offshore, restructures its portfolios, keeps operating globally. So that's a 2.5 out of 10 in terms of control over inputs. So what about narrative control? I mean, you'd think that the U.S. government, with its media and its institutions, its global cultural dominance and so forth, that they could at least frame the public perception of BlackRock, but no, they don't, and they won't even try. Again, public discourse around BlackRock is marginal. You never see congressional hearings about it. You rarely even hear their name in mainstream public political debates. And when you do, it's vague and sanitized. No one's going to talk about BlackRock. Not to mention all of the media corporations are actually owned by BlackRock. So the U.S. government versus BlackRock in terms of narrative control gets a 3.5. Now we ask, what happens if the U.S. Tries to confront BlackRock? Can they act without fear of blowback from BlackRock? Well, obviously no. Any serious confrontation by the U.S. government against BlackRock would destabilize their pension systems. It would tank their markets. It would trigger capital flight. No, BlackRock is too entangled to attack. That's what you call mutual hostage governance, except the hostage in this case is the government. So there's a score of 2.0 in terms of the ability to retaliate or the ability to control BlackRock. You simply cannot. And can the U.S. adapt with regards to BlackRock? Could they replace BlackRock's role? Could they build alternatives, take back control? Well, not without enormous systemic pain. The state has no institutional substitute for what BlackRock does. You know, management of retirement assets, stabilizing markets, advising the Fed, on and on. So that's a 2.0 on the U.S. government's adaptability reserve. They're stuck. How dependent is the U.S. on BlackRock? On capital, very. On asset management, completely. On market sentiment and investment flows, totally. So their dependency, America's dependency on BlackRock is a 7 out of 10. How vulnerable is the U.S. to disruption by BlackRock? Well, all BlackRock has to do is shift some capital. All they have to do is adjust some ESG compliance ratings or pull out of a market segment, and entire sectors of the economy could collapse. So that's a 6.5 score. How is the U.S. perceived compared to how BlackRock is perceived? Is America seen as strong and in control, or is it seen as weakened, as captured, as subservient to forces that it can no longer discipline? Well, that's a score of 7.0. If you add it all up, the U.S. relative power over BlackRock is negative 7.5. That's negative functional leverage. While BlackRock's relative power over the U.S. is plus 30. It means that America doesn't govern its corporate elite governs America. We need to be clear. This is not partnership. This is occupation. Okay, it's not military occupation, but economic occupation. You have a non-state actor that has greater decision-making power than the state. It can outmaneuver, it can outlast, and it outleverages the government that's supposed to regulate it. No. BlackRock is not an American company. It's a post-national institution. It's a private sovereign. It's a private sovereign embedded in the global system. Oh, but it gets worse. It gets worse for America. America's current power is no longer its own. As we said, it's been captured. It's been subordinated to the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. They still have power, but it's not their own. But even that status, as the strong man of the OCGFC, even that status is temporary because the role itself is being phased out. The United States is being decommissioned. Understand? Not destroyed, not invaded, but strategically disassembled, gradually and deliberately by the very elites who once empowered it. Because their system is evolving beyond the need, as I said, for a single hegemon. This isn't a theory. We can map it. We've done it. Using the Middle Nation Relative Power Index, we've projected the trajectory of the United States all the way up to the year 2050. And the result is quite sobering, or it should be for American citizens. I mean, right now, America's RPI is plus 12, like I said. By 2050, it drops to -7. A negative RPI means that the United States will be more vulnerable than it is dominant. It means that it will be shaped more than it shapes others. It will act less and be acted upon more. Okay, it will still have weapons, it will still have wealth, but it won't have control. Decision authority will be gone. Global governance is fragmenting. BRICS Plus, alternative institutions, regional pacts are rendering U.S. power frameworks obsolete. The U.S. is no longer going to be able to dictate global rules. Their control of inputs will be weak. America will be dependent on supply chains that it does not control, critical minerals that it does not possess, and foreign investors that they cannot defy. Their narrative control will be eroded. The world is no longer going to listen to them. Their monopoly on truth, morality, aspirations is broken completely by the year 2050. Multipolar epistemologies are rising even from now. America's voice already is just one among many. It's not the most credible voice. It's not the most listened to voice. And their immunity to retaliation will be fragile in 2050. Cyber war, financial sanctions, strategic decoupling, no. America is no longer going to enjoy the luxury of being able to act without consequences. And their, what we call their adaptability reserve, is going to be almost exhausted by 2050. Political paralysis, social fragmentation, unsustainable debt, crumbling infrastructure, that will choke any effort at serious reform. Not to mention there's no real desire for it. There's no will for it. Okay? So that's the dominance side of the equation of the RPI index. Now talk about dependency. America's going to be deeply dependent on foreign capital, on labor, on foreign manufacturing, on foreign resources, foreign controlled resources. And it's going to be exposed to the threat of disruption on every front, from within and from without. Their perceived vulnerability will be obvious. It will be global and it will be persistent. So what does the -7 RPI mean for the United States? It means that America, by mid-century, will no longer be the central power of the international system. It will not be feared, it will not be emulated, and it will not be trusted. It will be seen as unstable, volatile, overextended, and irrelevant to the decisions that are shaping the world's future. This is not necessarily something to celebrate or to gloat about, but it's something to understand because it changes the strategic landscape. It means the enforcement arm of financialized capital is failing. The illusion of American-led order is fading. And the real opportunity to build an alternative, equitable, sovereign, decolonized, that opportunity is now. Middle Nation doesn't just observe these changes, we prepare for them. We're trying to build the tools, the doctrine, the consciousness, and the cohesion that's going to be necessary to navigate what comes next. So now we've established that the United States, though still powerful on paper, is not using that power for itself, and by 2050, it won't even have that power anymore. The architecture of functional dominance that once underpinned the Western-led order is being hollowed out. But here's the thing. Power doesn't just vanish, it relocates. So where's it going? It's moving east and it's moving south. It's moving into the hands of a coalition that was once peripheral, fragmented, and marginalized. But today, they're consolidating, they're coordinating, and they're rising. And of course, I'm talking about BRICS. Now, I want you to understand this clearly. BRICS is not just a talking shop anymore. It's not just a slogan about multipolarity. It is becoming the functional center of the global power transition. We've measured it. If we put BRICS through the Middle Nation Relative Power Index, our system for calculating real leverage in the world, we've evaluated BRICS and we've evaluated it as a block. And what we found is decisive. BRICS currently holds an RPI of plus 27. Okay, that's super dominant. That's a super dominant rating. And it's not theoretical. That's operational. It's functional. You can identify what's really driving it. They have control of inputs. That's first. The BRICS nations collectively control the raw material base of the future. You know, oil, gas, food, rare earths, population, ports, everything. If you want to manufacture, if you want to grow, if you want to move anything, you are increasingly dependent on BRICS countries. The second big driver of why BRICS has a high score in the Relative Power Index is what you could say is immunity and redundancy. You know, the U.S. used to rule the world by threatening isolation or by threatening sanctions, but BRICS, they're building alternatives. Alternative payment systems, trade routes, currencies, even their own ratings agencies, their own development banks. The ability of the West to punish BRICS countries is decaying, it's weakening, while the ability of BRICS countries to resist and to retaliate is growing. Third, their adaptability. Most BRICS members are not what you call legacy powers. They're not locked into rigid ideological or institutional models. They're innovative. They can pivot. And most importantly, they can build because they still have young populations, so they can build. They have unexploited potential, and they have a hunger to rise. And then, according to the vector or the criteria of narrative control, well, they have legitimacy. Let's be honest, the world is tired of Western hypocrisy. The world is tired of being lectured on democracy by war criminals. They're tired of being told to trust in a system that has stolen from them for centuries. BRICS doesn't pretend to be perfect. It doesn't claim moral supremacy. BRICS just offers partnership instead of domination. That in and of itself is powerful. Harmony is powerful. And finally, BRICS has strategic cohesion. Yeah, everyone knows BRICS is diverse, but that diversity is no longer seen as weakness. It's becoming a strength, functionally. Different civilizations, different systems, different strengths, coordinated through trade, through diplomacy, and through mutual interest. Okay, that's not a traditional empire. That's a decentralized network of sovereignty, collective sovereignty. So let me put it plainly. As the U.S. RPI drops into negative territory, BRICS Plus is ascending into historic dominance over the next 25 years. The future of functional power will not be American. It will not be European. It will not be Western. It will be multipolar, decentralized, and led by the Global South. This isn't the end of world order. It's the end of their world order. And at Middle Nation, we're not trying to stand by the sidelines. We're trying to prepare people to lead in what comes next as civilizational actors with clarity, with direction, and with sovereignty. And what comes next is the end of American functional dominance. Okay, the empire is still standing, but the lights are off. And those who understand that now are going to be the ones who shape what rises after that falls. We've talked about the collapse of American power. We've seen that the U.S., the United States, by 2050, is no longer going to be the axis of the international system. Not just because it declined, but because something else rose. Relative power. Something decentralized rose, diverse, aligned with the reality of a post-Western world. BRICS, the collective sovereignty of the Muslim world, so on and so on. So now let's talk about where they're heading. By 2050, BRICS will hold an RPI of plus 38. Let me say that again, plus 38. It means that by mid-century, BRICS will not simply be an alternative to Western power. It will be the gravitational center of global power. This is not projection by fantasy. This is based on measurable dynamics. The decision authority by 2050, BRICS is going to be making the rules, not asking to be included, not submitting proposals. They're going to be writing the frameworks of trade, the frameworks of conflict resolution for cross-border digital systems, for economic development. They're going to write the rules. The G7 won't be setting the global agenda anymore. The world is going to look to Johannesburg, to Riyadh, to Delhi, to Shanghai. In terms of control of inputs, well, obviously, it's total. BRICS will dominate the energy market. whether that's fossil fuels or renewable energy. It's going to control the agricultural belts that feed the world, the rare earths, the shipping corridors, the industrial manufacturing, the ports. All of this is concentrated within the BRICS bloc. If you want to move, if you want to build, if you want to power anything in 2050, BRICS is going to be at the center of that process. And in terms of narrative control, okay, the West's monopoly is over. The West lost the microphone. By 2050, they lost the microphone. By 2050, you'll have media networks, you'll have academic institutions, you'll have AI systems within BRICS that are shaping public consciousness. They won't be parroting Western dogma either. They'll be articulating indigenous, Islamic, African, and Asian frameworks and Latin American frameworks. And in terms of their immunity to retaliation, well, by then, Western sanctions will be irrelevant. They'll have their own payment system. They'll have their own payment networks, their own currencies, their own capital markets. Well, they'll be sanction-proof by 2050. No one is going to be able to threaten them. No one's going to be able to threaten BRICS, not without serious cost. And their adaptability, obviously, they're young, fast-moving, future-oriented. They're going to be flexible where the West is brittle. They're going to be responsive where the West is paralyzed. They're going to be forward-looking while the West is trying to relive its past. And here's the important part. They're not going to be dependent on the West. They won't depend on the West. Their supply chains, internal. Their markets, internal. Their technologies, independent and internally created. Their ideology, authentic. Their moral legitimacy, rising. By 2050, BRICS won't be asking to join the table. They will be the table. They won't seek validation from Western powers. They will be the ones to provide validation or to withhold it. And obviously, this isn't going to be some new unipolarity. It won't be imperialism under a new name. We're talking about collective sovereignty. It will be a civilizational bloc, a post-colonial, post-Western consortium of power, where values are not dictated by some decaying, out-of-touch, deceitful elite, and where their strength isn't going to be measured by missiles, but how many people want to stand with them, by how many people support them. So the West collapses inward and BRICS expands outward. But what we're trying to do with Middle Nation is to prepare, like I say, to prepare our people to thrive, not by begging for inclusion, but by building where the future actually is. This is the global realignment. And we're not just observers, we are participants. So, okay, I talked about the power of BlackRock. Well, how much power does BRICS have over BlackRock or vice versa? The answer is BRICS power is growing and it's real. I mean, let's be clear. Obviously, BRICS doesn't regulate BlackRock. They don't license it. They don't police it. They can't do that in any meaningful way. But here's what BRICS does control. The food that BlackRock invests in, the energy that BlackRock invests in and depends on, the minerals, the markets, the labor, the infrastructure that BlackRock needs in order to remain profitable. That's what we call control of inputs. And BRICS score is a 7.5 out of 10. That's a powerful position. Because you don't need to control the firm itself if you control what the firm needs to function. You understand me? The Global South's economic immunity is increasing. In the past, Global South economies were like sitting ducks. You know, Western capital could enter and exit at will and cause chaos with no consequences for them. If you didn't play by the rules of the asset managers, you could get punished. But that's changing. BRICS plus economies are building immunity to retaliation. They're creating alternatives to SWIFT. You know, they're trying to find ways to bypass the dollar. They're using sovereign development banks now instead of relying on Western financiers. So we gave BRICS a score of 6.5 out of 10 for immunity to retaliation. It's not perfect, but they're not defenseless because they can walk away. This is key. BRICS doesn't need BlackRock. Understand me. The bloc is becoming increasingly self-sufficient with internal trade, domestic investment flows, and their own regional capital structures. They're building the ability to walk away from Western capital, to disengage, to redirect, and still grow. So that's an adaptability reserve of 8.0 out of 10. That means that if BlackRock pulls out, they survive. But if BRICS stops engaging with BlackRock, well, BlackRock suffers. So what's holding them back from doing that? Well, first, they don't have decision authority over BlackRock. Their score is low. They can't pass laws that bind BlackRock. They don't control the global narrative the way that BlackRock does compared to BlackRock. BlackRock still dominates ESG discourse, for example. Best practices discourse. So in terms of those types of things, we gave BRICS a score of 3.0 in terms of their decision authority and in terms of their narrative control, because they don't really have it. But even without those, their material leverage is undeniable. BRICS has a lot of power. So the overall RPI result for BRICS versus relative to BlackRock, their score is plus 14 over BlackRock. Okay, that's not global domination, but it is functional power, and it's growing, and it's sovereign, and it's resilient. And that tells us something critical. You don't have to defeat empire. You just have to make it irrelevant. You have to be able to walk away from it. You don't need to overthrow BlackRock. You just need to build a system in which BlackRock doesn't matter anymore. BlackRock has functional tools of discipline that it can pressure BRICS countries. You know, they can stigmatize your economy through the media, through ESG ratings, through investment ratings, and so forth. They can deny you investment. So we gave BlackRock a 5.5 in narrative control over BRICS. They have more control. They have that much control. And a 6.0 in immunity to retaliation, because let's face it, if you hit BlackRock, you might hurt yourself. But that's where the power stops. Let's be very clear. BlackRock cannot tell BRICS governments what to do. It has no decision authority over our states. Our states are still, alhamdulillah, predominantly reigning over the private sector, not the other way around, not like in the West. That's important. BlackRock is kind of like those vampires in the movie Sinners, where they have to be invited in. They can't impose themselves. They can't just bust in. They have to be invited. So what BRICS is doing right now is sort of breaking the illusion that BlackRock's participation is necessary. BRICS is building local capital ecosystems, like I said. They're building alternative ratings frameworks, state-backed banks, currency swap agreements. This is all important. Development institutions of their own. They don't care about ESG ratings. This means that BRICS is building their adaptability and their insulation. So we scored them an 8.0 in terms of their adaptability reserve versus BlackRock. BlackRock still has influence, but its leverage is declining in value, you know, because if you can walk away from something, then you're not being ruled by that something. BlackRock needs BRICS more than BRICS needs BlackRock. BlackRock needs access to energy, rare earths, manufacturing, labor, population, growing populations, and promised returns on capital that the West can no longer generate. So we scored BlackRock's direct dependence on BRICS as 6.0, because without profitable exposure to BRICS markets, BlackRock's portfolios will collapse into stagnation if they have to rely on the Western markets. And as BRICS becomes more assertive and potentially nationalizes key sectors, decouples from Western financial rule books, BlackRock's exposure to disruption goes up. So we scored 6.5 because, for example, China or Russia can shut the door if they choose to on BlackRock. And the perceived vulnerability of BlackRock is growing. In the global south, in the BRICS countries, in the younger economies, BlackRock is not seen as invincible anymore. It is seen as extractive. It is seen as nefarious. It is seen as colonial. So BlackRock's relative power index over BRICS is just plus 8.5. So yes, that's a moderate level of leverage. It can shape investment flows, like I said. It can manipulate perceptions. It can apply market pressure and so forth. They have some power. But this leverage only works as long as BRICS chooses to remain integrated in the BlackRock world. And BRICS is building a different world. So from our perspective, this isn't just about replacing one hegemon with another. That's not what it's about. It's about ending the era of national dominance, where firms like BlackRock could treat governments like clients, could treat populations like assets, and could treat sovereignty as nothing but a nuisance. Okay, BRICS isn't fully there yet, but it's moving. And the more it invests in sovereign capital formation, in regional financial platforms, and narrative independence, the less power BlackRock is going to have over anyone in the BRICS nations and in the global south generally. So what does all this mean? It means that the tide is turning, like I've been talking about. The tide is turning, not with fireworks, not with revolutions, but with slow, deliberate, structural realignment. And in that realignment, BlackRock doesn't disappear, but it becomes irrelevant. In the world that is being built now, irrelevance is the greatest defeat that any empire can suffer. If we fast forward again to the year 2050, okay, BlackRock is still going to exist, most likely. But it's not going to matter like it matters now. Its dominance is going to be over. Not by destruction, but by, like I say, irrelevance. And that's because BRICS, this block of sovereign civilizational powers, will have built a system where BlackRock has no leverage. The global south is going to go from obedience to ownership. That's their historical trajectory. You know, in 2025, BlackRock can punish a state with capital flight. They can punish them with narrative ESG compliance ratings and so forth. But by 2050, BRICS controls the foundations of value. They control the food, they control the energy, they control the minerals, they control the labor, they control the logistics, they control the growth markets. And BlackRock can't operate without them. That's what you call control of inputs, like I said. So on control of inputs in 2050, BRICS is a 9 out of 10. They own the supply side of civilization in 2050. In 2050, BRICS isn't just learning to play the game better, they changed the game. They rewrote the operating system of global capital by 2050. That's decision authority, 6 out of 10 and rising. Narrative control, by 2050, the global south no longer asks about ESG scores. They no longer ask for BlackRock's opinion on anything at all. In the past, if you disobeyed BlackRock, you paid the price. Your credit ratings would drop. Your investments would disappear. Your economy would suffer. But by 2050, no. BRICS is going to be immune. They don't need BlackRock's money. They won't need it. They don't need to rely on BlackRock's platforms. They won't care about BlackRock's judgment. That's immunity to retaliation. That's an 8.0 out of 10. Because you cannot be punished by a system that you are able to walk away from. And more than that, BRICS can pivot instantly. They have sovereign wealth funds. They have state banks. They have, I'm talking about by 2050, they're going to have regional financial loops. So their adaptability reserve goes all the way up to 9.5. What about their dependency? BRICS dependency on BlackRock. Well, that's going to be completely gone by 2050. In 2050, no one needs BlackRock. They don't need them to build their infrastructure. No one's going to need their capital to fund energy projects. No one's going to need their ratings to be trusted. No one's going to even trust their rating system. So we gave BRICS a dependency score of only 6 out of 30 because the vulnerability has vanished by 2050. So the final RPI score, we project that BRICS is going to hold a functional power of 33 over BlackRock in 2050. That's overwhelming dominance. Not militarily, not ideologically, but structurally. This is the end of the era of a-national rule. When a-national companies like BlackRock, without a flag, without people, without accountability, when they had the power, when BlackRock had the power to shape the world and to escape consequences of their actions, well, that era is over. Civilizational sovereignty will have returned. By 2050, what we're going to see is not necessarily the defeat of BlackRock, but it's the replacement of the context that gave BlackRock power. A new architecture. When you build new architecture, the old one crumbles on its own. When you create new definitions of value yourself, well, you regain your sovereignty. And in 2050, BRICS isn't going to fear BlackRock. BlackRock is going to fear irrelevance because it's no longer the owner of the future. The global south is. The Muslim world is. You are. And that's the real revolution.
Now, let's be realistic here. White people think they're not poor when they're really poor. You know, there is no white person who thinks he is poor or she is poor because even how poverty is presented to them is different. And therefore, they live knowing that we are better, we are rich, we can never lack and all that because that is the nature of the white supremacists. You know, they turned everything. Even when they came to Africa, they tried to make African people or black people look or have a perspective of things in a different way. They tried to deny them the opportunity to see things how they are or to maybe define things in their own way and all that. But they gave them now a room only for them to be able to define things in a different way or to look at things in a different way. And it was like they were forcing them to follow their, like black people to follow their ideologies, you know, them coming up with a certain mind and telling the black people, this is how things are, this is how things are. And blacks would follow because they didn't know much at that time. They thought maybe this is the right way and all that. Because the black culture and the black people, they're people who knew how to follow things, and the people who learned to listen to instructions and all that. When they look at these people, they thought they are good people. They were listening to the instructions. But the white people had an intention of changing things, you know. So even in the white Americans, their minds have been sabotaged. Their minds have been manipulated. You're told a phone isn't a phone, it's a television, and you believe in that. Yeah, you're told that a human being is not a human being, is an animal, and you believe in it because how it's being presented to you, or how it's being explained to you. Sometimes you're manipulated to understand things in a different way or in a wrong way. And that is why the white Americans have always lived a life that isn't theirs. Them thinking they're better, them thinking they're great, them thinking they're the best compared to other people. Yet, when it comes now to in terms of thinking, in terms of giving or coming up with things and all that, yeah, they find out that black people are somehow better compared to them. You see, they know things which doesn't exist. They have an understanding, or maybe they have an information of things that doesn't exist, but they believe in it without knowing these things that does not exist. How people live, or how the government and leadership in America it is a leadership that makes people accept that anger is good even when it's not good. Yeah, suffering is better even when suffering is not better. They are made to believe that struggling, it is for a purpose, even when there is no purpose for it, or there is no any good intention for it. If someone comes here and tries to justify wrong, and they've always believed in people who live there who are justifying wrong. You justify pain, you justify suffering, you justify struggle. White people cannot ask the government that why are you doing this, or why are you actually doing a certain thing in a certain way, because they've always believed that whatever happens, it is happening for our good, even if it's not happening for their good, because that is what they've been made to believe, and that is what they have always believed in. So they're living a life that does not belong to them. They're living a lie. They've been lied to for many years. They've been lied to so much, and they believe in it. They understand that is who they're supposed to be, even when they're not supposed to be that way. You see, they've been told how they're the superiors. They're the ones who are holding the earth and the world and all that without them, nothing can happen. That's why we have the white supremacist. You see, when a white person looks at a black person, feels like, who the hell is this person? And that is where racism came from, because you thinking you're better than other people, you thinking that other people do not matter at all. You are the one who, those kind of things. And that is how life has always been. It was fashioned. The system that was created, it was a system that made a white person believe in things that doesn't exist. It is a system that was made to believe that is who they are. And that is why we have had something that is called MAGA, Making America Great Again. People believing in it, believing that the government is working to make us great, that everything that is working is for our good and all that. Look at what is happening right now. By them believing in those kind of things, now the white farmers, they are struggling, the Nebraska farmers, they are struggling, because you keep on believing that things will be better, yet things continue to be wrong and all that. You see, the government isn't working for the people, it is working for the rich, but they're made to believe that it is working for the rich for a purpose. It is because of your own good, even if it's not for their own good. And so white people have lived in lies. They believe in things that doesn't exist. And Shahid Bolsen has just told them the truth, because that is what it is. Yeah. Sometimes many of them would listen to this and they will say, it's not true and all of that. But it is a bitter truth that everybody is getting to know today. Tell me what you think in the comment section about this. I will do my best to make sure I read all of them and give a response where possible. Thanks for always coming and for always being here, for always watching, subscribing and supporting me. I really do appreciate so very much. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to like and share and press notification bell. Be the first person to get every episode as it comes in. I am Ashamba Haiti from the African Streamline. Until next episode, peace be with you.